On March 14, 1987, in Anchorage, Alaska, Kirby Anthoney viciously killed Nancy Newman, a 32-year-old wife and mother, along with their daughters Melissa and Angie. Happy married couple John and Nancy Newman resided in Anchorage, Alaska, with their two daughters Melissa 8 and Angie 3. The family had moved to Anchorage from Twin Falls, Idaho, initially in search of better possibilities. In Gwenny's old Alaskan restaurant, Nancy was a waitress. John had been employed by an airline firm, but due to an on-the-job injury, he was no longer able to perform his duties. He was starting again and pursuing a profession as a locksmith and security technician in California. They lived in a large apartment complex on Ide Street in Anchorage. Cheryl Chapman, Nancy's sister, was called. Paul and Cheryl took a car to the Newmans' flat on Ide Street. The pair used their extra key to open the door as there was no one around to answer it. They discovered Nancy and her two girls, who had been killed horribly, in different parts of the flat. Paul dialed 911 right away. In between, I would request you to like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Now continuing. The crime scene was unlike anything the investigators had ever seen, they claimed. 2 bowls of cereal and a coffee cup that was only half full of coffee were all that was left of breakfast. Also, on the kitchen table was the tin that Nancy kept her tips in, which was empty. There was also a cigarette butt in the ashtray that was not a brand associated with the family. They discovered Nancy in the Newmans' bedroom, lying on her bed with her nightgown pulled up over her chest, with swelling and abrasions on her forehead, nose, and chin, signs that the suspect had struck her repeatedly in the face. Around her neck was a blue pillowcase with blue knots. At the foot of the bed, the investigators also found a little amount of blood. A pair of gloves in the shade of olive green were also discovered by the police, lying on top of the dresser. Melissa was discovered on the floor of her bedroom. Her hands were bound behind her back with a different pillowcase, and a pillowcase was also tied around her neck. Based on evidence, including DNA, investigators surmised that Melissa had been taken to Nancy's bedroom, where they were both sexually assaulted. Then the assailant had taken Melissa to her bedroom, where she was killed. A washcloth that had a significant amount of DNA, including blood and hair follicles, was discovered by investigators in the bathroom. Sergeant Mike Grimes of the Anchorage Police Department created the homicide response team 3 years prior. Because the crime scene was so complex, police contacted the FBI for assistance. 3 hair follicles were extracted from the bodies of the Newman family during the examination by Michael Probst, MD, who used a laser. A 4th hair follicle and olive green fibers, possibly from the gloves discovered in the master bedroom, were also discovered by forensics on the washcloth from the bathroom. The same person provided all samples, which all displayed evidence of pubic lice treatment. Technicians found a full handprint on the wall 10 inches above Melissa's head, where her head would have been if she had been assaulted. After dusting every surface for fingerprints, this positioning implied that Melissa had experienced a sexual assault in her bedroom. The FBI Center in Virginia received a sizable portion of the evidence for in-depth review. The FBI's Doug Diedrich, a trace evidence examiner, tested the feasibility of moving pubic hair from one location to another. Judson Ray, an FBI profiler from their Behavioral Science Division, was enlisted by the FBI to provide additional support. Police also believed Anthony was responsible for the deaths of 2 Native American girls, but they were unable to corroborate those claims due to a lack of evidence. Nancy, Melissa, and Angie Newman all passed away, although Anthony denied any involvement. In 1982, he admitted to authorities that he had perpetrated an armed robbery during which he had sprayed an elderly woman in a wheelchair with mace before taking her money. He claimed that he did this to prevent her from screaming. He did confess, but he then changed his mind and was found not guilty of the assault. His history of criminal activity was diverse. Investigators also learned that he had beaten and stalked 3 past girlfriends. He would never be prosecuted, though, because all charges have been dropped during the investigations. Anthony claimed to have no access to the apartment's key during his formal interview with investigators, even though police were aware he did. He also misrepresented where he was when the killings were perpetrated. He claimed that no one had seen him drinking and playing dice at a nearby house, where he had been. Anthony reportedly stopped at Chilkoot Charlie's Tavern 5 days after the killings. Anthony demonstrated a tendency that FBI profiler Mr. Ray had warned may occur when he called investigators on April 13th to inquire about the progress of the probe. The next morning, the investigator was to visit with him. Anthony called the investigators shortly before their arranged meeting time to say that he was helping a friend with their truck and would not be able to make it to their meeting. Dan Grant called the police 2 days later to report that Anthony had driven off in his blue Ford pickup. Grant claimed Anthony had instructed him to play dumb and claimed he was not at home, that I didn't know where he was at, as he was on his way to the Canadian border. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police and U.S. Customs personnel were alerted by police to be on the lookout for Anthony. Anthony was detained on a suspended driver's license at the Tok border, 320 miles northeast of Anchorage, around midnight on the same day. He was returned to Anchorage, where he was formally charged with 3 counts of murder, 2 counts of rape, and 1 count of kidnapping because Melissa's arms had been bound. This is a law specific to Alaska. The FBI lab returned the test findings while the inmate was being housed at the Fairbanks Correctional Center. According to the evidence, Kirby Anthony's prints matched those on the tin that Nancy used to store her tips. Semen taken from the victims and a washcloth was also conclusively confirmed as belonging to Anthony. Additionally, Anthony's hair follicles were identified in all 4 samples. Anthony may have had sexual contact with Nancy after her death if blood and feces retrieved from his clothing early in the investigation were found to match. Nancy's camera, which was discovered at the Grant home, was discovered through further research. Investigators also discovered that Anthony had been using rolling change, which they assumed to be Nancy's gratuities, to pay for items. Anthony was awaiting trial when he was attacked by another inmate, Kevin Collins. Collins, a cocaine dealer who was in jail for the murder of 4 people, was quoted as saying, "If I ever get another chance, he won't need no trial. There's no need to kill a woman and 2 little girls. I have a young daughter myself." The bodies of the Newman family were visible on a videotape of the murder scene that was played for the jury during the trial. Anthony, who had agreed to serve as co-counsel, came across as amiable and well-groomed. Even though John Newman was in great distress, he gave what testimony he could. Anthony even took the stand in his defense, claiming that the police were attempting to frame him. Considering how intricate the case was, the jury's deliberations lasted only a brief time. According to reports, this is the first instance in which a profiler's expert testimony has been accepted in court. On June 3, 1988, after an 8-week trial, Kirby Anthony was found guilty of the murders of Nancy, Melissa, and Angie. He was sentenced to prison for 357 years and not the death penalty because Alaska does not have the death penalty. Now this video comes to an end. Thank you for watching.